Millionaire got hacked and ruined until the delivery girl did what no programmer had done.
UPS delivery for Anthony Halls. I need a signature, please.
Just leave it outside.
Sir, I need a signature for this one. It's marked urgent and… Sir, are you okay? You look…
I'm fine. Give me the damn tablet.
Sir, your hands are shaking. When's the last time you ate something? Or slept?
Why do you care? You should go. You should leave right now.
Is someone hurting you? Do you need me to call someone?
Call someone? Everyone I've called has made it worse. 3 cybersecurity firms, the FBI, my lawyers, they're all useless. I'm finished.
Cybersecurity? You've been hacked?
Hacked, destroyed, erased. Take your pick. They took everything. $47 million gone. My businesses, my reputation, my life. And they're still out there, watching. You should leave before they see you here. I'm poison right now.
How long has this been happening?
6 months! Why does it matter? You're a delivery girl, not a…
Not a what? Not someone who can help?
No one can help me. I'm sorry. I didn't mean. Just go. Please.
What if I told you I might know a way?
What?
Let me see your system. Give me 30 minutes. If I can't find something your experts missed, I'll leave and you'll never see me again.
You're insane.
Maybe. But you're desperate. And I know what desperate feels like.
30 minutes. That's it.
That was September 3rd, 2023. A Tuesday afternoon that would change 2 lives forever. Neither of them knew it yet, but that 30-minute promise would turn into 16 hours of work, 2 years of recovery, and eventually, a wedding that no one saw coming. This is the story of how a millionaire lost everything to faceless hackers, and how a delivery girl with a painful past did what no expert programmer had been able to do. But to understand how extraordinary that day was, you need to know who these 2 people really were, and how they both ended up at that door in that moment when everything hung in the balance. Anthony Halls wasn't born into wealth. That's important to understand. He built his empire the way most self-made millionaires do, through a combination of intelligence, timing, and an almost reckless confidence that somehow always paid off. By the time he turned 34, Anthony had accumulated a portfolio worth $47 million. Not inherited. Not gifted. Earned through shrewd investments in emerging tech companies, real estate in Seattle's booming market, and an almost supernatural ability to spot trends before they became mainstream. His penthouse in downtown Seattle sat on the 42nd floor of the Insignia Tower. All floor-to-ceiling windows and minimalist furniture that cost more than most people's cars. When you walked in, you saw the city sprawled beneath you like a kingdom, and in many ways that's exactly how Anthony saw it. His kingdom. His throne. His world to command. But kingdoms have always fallen because of the same fatal flaw, pride. Anthony's morning routine was sacred. Wake at 5:30 a.m. Black coffee, no sugar. Scan the Asian markets first, then Europe, then prepare for the U.S. opening bell. By 6:45 a.m., he'd have made 3 trades that would net him anywhere from $15,000 to $40,000. Before most people had finished their first cup of coffee, Anthony had made what they'd earn in a year. His office occupied an entire floor of a building in Belltown. 12 employees, all brilliant, all paid exceptionally well to manage different aspects of his investment empire. Sarah Chen handled his cryptocurrency portfolio. Marcus Rodriguez managed his real estate holdings. Jennifer Kim, no relation to our delivery girl, oversaw his stock investments in AI and biotech companies. Everything ran like clockwork. Until it didn't. The thing about Anthony Halls was that he loved to talk. Not in person, he was actually quite reserved in face-to-face interactions. But online? Online, Anthony was a different person. He frequented exclusive investment forums, places where you needed verification of at least 10 million in assets just to get through the digital door. These weren't public spaces. These were virtual lounges where the wealthy shared strategies, bragged about wins, and occasionally, tragically, shared far too much information. Username: Halls of Wealth. In retrospect, even the username was a mistake. Anthony posted regularly. His latest win in Tesla options. The AI startup he'd gotten into on the ground floor that just went public. The Seattle real estate deal that netted him $2.3 million in profit. He never shared exact numbers publicly, but he shared enough. Screenshots with partial account numbers visible. Photos of signed contracts with details that shouldn't have been shared. Comments about which banks he used, which brokers managed his accounts, even casual mentions of his daily routines. His security team warned him. Jennifer had brought it up in at least 4 different meetings. Anthony, you're leaving breadcrumbs. Someone's going to follow them. Relax, he'd said, that confident smile playing at his lips. These forums are vetted. Everyone there has as much to lose as I do. Besides, I never share anything truly sensitive. He believed that. He genuinely believed he was being careful. March 15, 2023 started like any other day. Anthony woke at 5:30 a.m., made his coffee, sat down at his home office setup with its 6 monitors arranged in a perfect arc. The Asian markets had closed up. His positions in several Japanese tech firms were performing beautifully. Europe was looking strong. Everything was perfect. At 6:47 a.m., he received an email. The sender was listed as secureinvest_verify at investmentforum-secure.com. The email explained that there had been a security breach on the investment forum he frequented. All members needed to verify their accounts immediately to ensure no unauthorized access had occurred. The email looked legitimate. It had the forum's logo, the same professional formatting, even the same signature from the forum's administrator that he'd seen 100 times before. Anthony clicked the link. He entered his forum username and password on what looked exactly like the forum's login page. The page processed for a moment, then showed an error message. Session expired. Please try again. He tried again. Same error. Frustrated, he closed the browser and went directly to the forum's actual website. Everything looked fine there. He logged in normally. Saw no warnings about any breach. Weird, he muttered and moved on with his day. That single click, those few seconds of entering his credentials into a fake website, had just handed over the keys to his kingdom. But Anthony didn't know that yet. He wouldn't know for another 18 hours. The hackers weren't amateurs. They weren't the kind of people who break into systems and immediately drain everything, setting off every alarm. These were professionals. Patient. Methodical. They understood that the real art of theft isn't in the taking. It's in the not getting caught until it's far too late. They had his forum password. But people, especially careful people, use different passwords for different things, right? Except Anthony, like so many people who should know better, used variations of the same core password across multiple platforms. His forum password was Halls W3ALF 2023. His primary email password was hallsw3alf_em. His backup email was hallsw3alf_2em. See the pattern? The hackers did. Within 6 hours, they had access to both his email accounts. From there, they began the patient work of mapping his entire digital life. Every account, every bank, every investment platform, every piece of his financial empire. They didn't take anything yet. They just watched, learned, waited. Anthony went about his day completely unaware. He had lunch with a potential investor. He made 3 profitable trades. He went to his gym, did his workout, came home. He made dinner, salmon and asparagus, paired with a nice Pinot Noir. He watched some Netflix. He went to bed at 10:30 p.m., satisfied with another successful day. While he slept, they began to move. At 2:17 a.m., the first authentication request went through. Then another. Then another. By 4:30 a.m., they had successfully bypassed 2-factor authentication on 3 of his investment accounts using a sophisticated SIM swap attack. They'd called his phone carrier, impersonated him convincingly enough, and had his phone number transferred to a device they controlled. Every security code that was supposed to protect him now went straight to them. When Anthony woke up at 5:30 a.m. on March 16th, he made his coffee, walked to his office, and sat down at his monitors expecting another perfect day. Instead, his world started crumbling. His primary investment account showed a balance of $847. It should have shown $18.2 million. His hand shook as he refreshed the page. Still $847. He clicked on transaction history. His blood went cold. Overnight, someone had liquidated everything. Every stock, every bond, every option. Sold at market price regardless of losses. The money had been transferred out to accounts he'd never seen before. He grabbed his phone. 17 missed calls. 31 emails. All flagged urgent. His secondary account, compromised. His cryptocurrency wallet, emptied. His real estate holding company's operating account, drained. His personal checking, his savings, his money market account, all of it, gone. $23 million had disappeared in less than 4 hours while Seattle slept. Anthony's hands trembled as he started making calls. His bank, his broker, his lawyer. Everyone was sympathetic but moved with bureaucratic slowness. Fraud investigations take time. Recovery processes are complex. We'll do everything we can, Mr. Halls. But here's what they didn't tell him, what he'd learn in the brutal weeks to come. When money moves through cryptocurrency tumblers and international accounts with layers of shell companies, it becomes nearly impossible to trace. And more importantly, when someone has access to your entire digital identity, the bleeding doesn't stop just because you make some phone calls. This wasn't just theft. This was war. And Anthony had just lost the first battle without even knowing he was fighting. By noon on March 16th, Anthony Halls, the man who woke up that morning worth $47 million, was effectively broke. Everything liquid was gone. Everything else was frozen in legal limbo. And the hackers, they were just getting started. But sometimes, the moments that destroy us are also setting the stage for the people who will save us. Anthony didn't know it yet, but in 6 months, a UPS delivery girl named Kimberly Johnson would knock on his door. And nothing would ever be the same again. You know what's interesting about stories like this? We always think we're too smart for the obvious traps. We think our security is tight enough, our passwords are strong enough, our vigilance is enough. But the truth is, we're all one click away from disaster. One moment of distraction. One convincing email. That's all it takes. And if you're finding this story compelling, if you're sitting there thinking about your own digital security right now, do me a favor, tap that subscribe button. Because the way this story unfolds, the way Kim saves Anthony using methods no one else thought of, you're going to want to see how creative solutions can come from the most unexpected places. Trust me on this one. They found 17 pieces of malware the first company had missed, hidden in places even their sophisticated scans hadn't checked. They removed everything. They rebuilt his entire digital security infrastructure from scratch. They set up monitoring systems that would alert them of any suspicious activity within seconds. "You're protected now, Mr. Halls," the lead consultant assured him. "Multiple layers of defense. Military-grade encryption. Nothing's getting through this." Day 14, Anthony discovered someone had filed a fraudulent tax return in his name, claiming a refund of $2.7 million. The IRS, the real IRS this time, was now investigating him for tax fraud. His accountant estimated it would take 6 to 8 months to untangle the mess, and that was if everything went smoothly, which it wouldn't. By week 3, Anthony had lost 34 pounds. He wasn't eating regularly. Sleep was impossible without medication, and even then he'd wake up every few hours in a cold sweat, grabbing his phone to check if any new disaster had struck. His employees were worried. Jennifer Kim, his stock portfolio manager, staged an intervention of sorts, showing up at his penthouse with groceries and refusing to leave until he ate something. "Anthony, you look like death," she said bluntly. "Whatever's happening, you can't let it kill you." But that's exactly what it felt like. A slow death. A dismantling of everything he'd built, piece by piece, day by day. Week 4, the third cybersecurity firm arrived. Global Tech Security, an international operation with offices in 12 countries. They cost $67,000 for their comprehensive package. They brought 10 specialists. They worked for 6 days straight, 15 hours a day. They found breaches the previous 2 firms had missed. Backdoors in systems that should have been clean. Persistent malware that kept reinstalling itself from hidden partitions. The lead specialist, a woman named Dr. Sarah Chen, pulled Anthony aside on day 6 of their engagement. "Mr. Halls, I need to be honest with you. Whoever is targeting you, they're not ordinary hackers. This is sophisticated, nation-state level sophistication, or a very, very well-funded criminal organization. They've been in your systems for months, maybe longer. They know everything. And every time we lock one door, they have 17 other ways in because they've had time to build them." "So what do I do?" Anthony asked, his voice hoarse from exhaustion. "Honestly, burn it all down. Every device. Every account. Start completely fresh with a new identity. Move. Change your name if you have to. It's the only way to be sure." Anthony stared at her. "That's your professional recommendation? Run and hide." "No. My professional recommendation is that we keep fighting, keep securing, keep monitoring. But realistically, they're always going to be 3 steps ahead because they've spent months preparing for our countermoves." She was right. By week 6, even with Global Tech's systems in place, the attacks continued. Smaller now but constant. Like a dripping faucet that won't stop no matter how many times you tighten it. His email would be secure for 3 days, then suddenly compromised again. His bank accounts were finally stabilized, but then his health insurance was canceled due to fraudulent claims he never made. His driver's license was suspended due to a fake DUI report filed in his name. The psychological toll was worse than the financial one, and that's saying something considering he'd lost $47 million. Anthony stopped leaving his penthouse. He had groceries delivered. He conducted all business, what little remained of it, over video calls. He became paranoid about every notification, every email, every unknown number calling his phone. His business was collapsing. Partners were abandoning him. Investors were pulling out of his ventures, spooked by the constant chaos surrounding his name. The real estate deals he had pending fell through because title companies wouldn't work with him anymore. The risk was too high. His reputation, the one thing that had been worth more than all his millions, was in tatters. By week 8, Anthony's accountant sat him down for a brutal conversation. After legal fees, cybersecurity fees, frozen assets, and outright theft, Anthony's net worth had gone from $47 million to approximately $380,000. Most of that was equity in his penthouse, which he couldn't sell without taking a massive loss in the current market. For all practical purposes, the millionaire was broke. But that still wasn't the worst of it. Week 10, Anthony received a package at his door. Inside was a photo of him taken through his penthouse window. On the back, written in red marker, "We can reach you whenever we want." He called the FBI immediately. They increased patrols in his area. They suggested again that he consider relocating, at least temporarily. But where was he supposed to go? He couldn't afford the kind of security he'd need to feel safe. The hackers had taken that option from him too. By month 4, Anthony had given up on the cybersecurity firms. They meant well. They were competent. But this was like trying to hold back the ocean with a bucket. The hackers were too embedded, too prepared, too many steps ahead. He stopped fighting, stopped trying to rebuild, stopped hoping. He just existed, alone in his 42nd floor penthouse that now felt more like a prison than a palace, watching the city below continue on with life while his had effectively ended. The penthouse's mortgage was bleeding his remaining resources. He'd have to sell soon. Move into something smaller. Something he could actually afford on whatever job he could find now that his name was synonymous with financial scandal and cybercrime. By month 5, Anthony Halls had become a ghost. His social media accounts stayed deleted. His business ventures had all been dissolved or taken over by remaining partners who'd pushed him out. His phone only rang with calls from lawyers, bill collectors, and the occasional journalist hoping for a story. He spent his days sitting in his home office, staring at monitors he was afraid to turn on. At night, he'd stand at those floor-to-ceiling windows and look down at the city 42 floors below and wonder, not for the first time, how much it would hurt. That's where his mind was on September 3, 2023, the day Kimberly Johnson knocked on his door with a UPS package. He almost didn't answer. He'd been ignoring the doorbell for weeks. But something, maybe just habit, maybe fate, made him walk to that door and open it. And on the other side stood a woman who would save his life in more ways than one. But to understand why Kim could do what 3 cybersecurity firms couldn't, why a delivery girl succeeded where experts failed, you need to understand who Kimberly Johnson really was. Because her story is just as remarkable as his, just far more hidden. And it starts not in Seattle, but in a small town in Ohio, 18 years before she ever knocked on Anthony's door. Kimberly Johnson was 7 years old when she fixed her first computer. It wasn't a particularly impressive repair by adult standards, just reconnecting a loose RAM stick that had jostled free during a move. But the way she approached the problem showed a mind that worked differently than most. Her father, Marcus Johnson, had been frustrated with the family's desktop computer for 3 days. It would boot up, show the loading screen, then crash with a blue screen of error messages. He'd called a repair technician who'd quoted him $150 just to look at it. Money the Johnson family didn't have lying around. Little Kim had watched her father's frustration from the doorway of his home office. Then, while he was at work, she'd taken a screwdriver from the kitchen drawer, opened the computer's case, and methodically inspected every connection. When she found the loose RAM stick, she clicked it firmly back into place, reassembled everything, and powered the machine on. It worked perfectly. When her father came home to find his 7-year-old daughter had fixed his computer, he'd been simultaneously proud and terrified. "Kim, baby, you could have electrocuted yourself," he'd said, hugging her tight. But he couldn't hide the amazement in his voice. That was Kim. Fearless. Curious. Built for problem-solving. She grew up in Dayton, Ohio, in a modest 3-bedroom house that her parents had scraped together every penny to buy. Her father worked as a logistics coordinator for a regional shipping company. Her mother, Patricia, was a nurse at the local hospital, working long shifts that often meant Kim came home to an empty house after school. Kim didn't mind. The empty house meant she could spend hours on the family computer, teaching herself to code from free online tutorials, taking apart and reassembling electronics she found at garage sales, building her skills one afternoon at a time. By the time she was 12, she was building websites for local small businesses. By 14, she'd created a scheduling app for her mother's hospital floor that was so good, the hospital actually purchased it and implemented it hospital-wide. They paid her $3,000, money she immediately put into a savings account for college. Her parents were in awe of their daughter. Neither of them had gone to college. They'd worked hard, saved carefully, and built a stable if modest life. But Kim was going to do something extraordinary. They believed that with every fiber of their being. When Kim was 15, she took the SAT on a whim, just to see how she'd do. She scored a 1520 out of 1600. The guidance counselor called her parents in for a meeting. "Your daughter is remarkable," she'd said. "With scores like these and her portfolio of programming work, she could get into any computer science program in the country." That night, the Johnson family sat around their kitchen table and dreamed bigger than they'd ever dared to dream before. MIT, Stanford, Carnegie Mellon, schools they'd only seen in movies. Kim applied to 12 universities. She got into 9. But MIT offered her a full scholarship, tuition, room and board, everything. The letter arrived in the spring of her senior year, and Patricia Johnson cried for 2 hours straight, clutching that acceptance letter like it was made of gold. Maybe it was. Kim started at MIT in the fall of 2013, just 18 years old, carrying 2 suitcases and a laptop her parents had saved for months to buy her. She was terrified. She'd never been farther from Ohio than a family trip to Chicago. Now she was in Cambridge, Massachusetts, surrounded by some of the brightest minds in the world, and she was supposed to be one of them. Imposter syndrome hit her hard those first few months. Everyone seemed smarter, more prepared, more confident. But then she got her first semester grades. Straight A's across the board. Top of her class in 2 courses. Suddenly, she realized something important. She belonged here. She'd earned this. The next 3 years were the best of Kim's life. She thrived at MIT. She joined research labs. She collaborated on papers that got published. She spent late nights in the computer science building with friends, debugging code and dreaming about the future. She dated occasionally, nothing serious, too focused on her studies to get deeply involved with anyone. She went home for Christmas and summer breaks, where her parents would parade her around the neighborhood like she was a celebrity, which to them she was. During the summer after her junior year, Kim interned at a cybersecurity firm in Boston. That's where she learned the darker side of computer science. The way systems could be exploited. The psychology of hackers. The cat-and-mouse game between those who built security and those who broke through it. She was good at it. Really good. Her supervisor told her she had an intuitive understanding of how attackers thought, a rare skill that couldn't really be taught. "You don't just see the code," he'd said. "You see the person behind the code. That's a gift." Kim returned to MIT for her senior year in the fall of 2016. She was 21 years old. Graduation was 8 months away. She'd already had preliminary conversations with 3 major tech companies about job offers. Her parents had booked flights to Boston for her graduation ceremony the following May. Life was perfect. Absolutely perfect. October 8, 2016 was a Saturday. Kim was in the library working on her senior thesis when her phone rang. Unknown Ohio number. She almost didn't answer, but something made her step outside and take the call. The voice on the other end identified herself as a state police officer. There had been an accident. A plane. Flight 2847. Cleveland to Orlando. Mechanical failure. It had gone down in a field outside Columbus. There were no survivors. Kim remembers the sound of her own voice asking the question. Were Marcus and Patricia Johnson on that flight? The officer's pause told her everything before the words came. Yes, ma'am. I'm so sorry. Is there someone who can be with you right now? Kim doesn't remember hanging up the phone. She doesn't remember how she got back to her dorm room. The next clear memory she has is of her roommate, Sarah, holding her while she sobbed so hard she couldn't breathe. Her parents had been going on vacation. Their first real vacation in 20 years. 5 days in Orlando, Disney World, the beach, everything they'd always dreamed of doing but couldn't afford when Kim was growing up. Now that she was settled at MIT, they'd finally saved enough to go. The trip killed them. The next 3 months were a blur of unimaginable bureaucracy and pain. Kim flew back to Ohio for the funeral. The entire neighborhood showed up. Over 200 people crowded into the small church, sharing stories about Marcus and Patricia Johnson, about their kindness, their hard work, their pride in their brilliant daughter. Kim stood at the front and delivered a eulogy she doesn't remember writing and barely remembers speaking. She talked about her father teaching her to change a tire. Her mother's late-night conversations with her about boys and dreams and the future. She talked about how they'd sacrificed everything to give her opportunities they never had. She didn't talk about the rage building inside her. The unfairness of it all. The cosmic cruelty of watching her parents finally take a moment for themselves only to have it rip them from the world. After the funeral came the legal nightmare. Her parents had life insurance through their employers. Combined, the policies were worth $800,000. It was supposed to be Kim's safety net, the thing that would ensure their daughter would be okay even if something happened to them. But accessing that money proved nearly impossible. The insurance companies initially offered their condolences and assured Kim the money would be processed within 60 days. That was a lie. First, they needed death certificates. Then they needed proof that Kim was the legal beneficiary. Then they needed additional documentation because the deaths occurred in a plane crash, which triggered special investigation protocols. Then they needed more time because the crash investigation wasn't complete. Months passed. Kim's savings from her hospital app and some summer jobs, around $8,000, was evaporating. Her parents' house had a mortgage. Their cars had payments. Bills kept arriving, and there was no money to pay them. Kim hired a lawyer, which cost $5,000 she couldn't afford. The lawyer said these cases were complex but assured her they'd get the money eventually. Just be patient. But MIT wouldn't be patient. Kim's scholarship covered tuition, but she still needed money for basic living expenses, books, her phone bill, everything else that comes with being a human being trying to survive. Her savings ran out in December. By January, she was sleeping in the library some nights because she couldn't afford to pay for student housing for the spring semester. Her friends helped when they could. Sarah let her stay in their dorm room unofficially, sneaking her in and out. Other classmates bought her meals, slipping her cash that she was too proud to take but too desperate to refuse. Her professors noticed she looked exhausted, undernourished, on the edge of collapse. One professor, Dr. Elizabeth Morrison, pulled her aside after class. "Kimberly, You're one of the brightest students I've ever taught. But you can't keep going like this. You need to take care of yourself." "I'm trying," Kim had said, her voice cracking. "I'm trying so hard." But trying wasn't enough. In February, the financial aid office informed her that without payment, she couldn't register for classes for the fall semester. She was 3 months away from graduating. 3 months away from completing everything her parents had dreamed for her. And she couldn't afford to finish. The lawyer was still fighting with the insurance companies. The plane crash investigation was still ongoing. Everything was frozen in bureaucratic limbo while Kim's entire life fell apart in real time. She made the hardest decision of her life in March of 2017. She withdrew from MIT. Just for now, she told herself. Just until the insurance money came through and she could pay what she owed and re-enroll. It was temporary. It had to be temporary. But temporary has a way of becoming permanent when you're drowning. Kim moved back to Ohio, to her parents' house that the bank was threatening to foreclose on. She got a job at a grocery store, stocking shelves for $9.50 an hour. She continued fighting with the insurance companies, making calls during her breaks, filling out endless forms, getting nowhere. By summer, the house was gone. Foreclosed. Kim moved into a tiny studio apartment in a rough neighborhood in Dayton. She worked 2 jobs, the grocery store and waitressing at night. Every penny went to surviving and to her lawyer, who kept promising results but delivering only more delays. The insurance companies began offering settlements. First $200,000. Take it or leave it. Kim's lawyer advised her to wait, to fight for the full amount. Then they offered $350,000. Her lawyer said they could get more. Kim was beginning to suspect her lawyer was dragging things out to rack up fees. By 2018, Kim was exhausted. Physically, emotionally, spiritually exhausted. She'd been away from computer science for over a year. Her skills were getting rusty. Her dreams felt like they'd belonged to a different person. Then Amazon opened a fulfillment center outside Dayton. The pay was better than her current jobs. $15 an hour. Plus benefits. Kim applied and got hired immediately. She quit her other jobs and threw herself into warehouse work. It was mind-numbing. Repetitive. Nothing like the intellectual challenge of MIT. But it paid the bills barely, and gave her brain a rest from thinking about everything she'd lost. 3 years passed in a haze of work and survival. Kim's 25th birthday came and went without celebration. The insurance companies and her lawyer were still locked in legal battles. The settlement offers had stopped coming. Everyone had dug into their positions, and Kim was the one suffering while they sorted it out. In 2021, she couldn't take Ohio anymore. Too many memories. Too much pain. She needed a fresh start somewhere that didn't remind her of everything she'd lost. She chose Seattle almost at random. It was far from Ohio. It had a tech scene, not that she was part of it anymore, but maybe being near that energy would feel like being close to the dreams she'd abandoned. She had $3,000 saved. It was enough to rent a U-Haul, drive across the country, and secure a tiny studio apartment in a cheap part of the city. She applied at UPS and got hired as a delivery driver. The pay was decent. The work was physical, which she'd gotten used to. And every day, she drove through neighborhoods in Seattle that housed the kind of tech workers she was supposed to become. She delivered packages to Amazon engineers, to Microsoft developers, to startup founders who probably had half her natural talent but all the luck and circumstances she'd been denied. It should have made her bitter. And some days it did. But mostly, Kim just felt numb. She still coded sometimes. Late at night in her tiny studio apartment, after a 12-hour shift delivering packages, she'd open her laptop and work on small projects. Keep her skills from completely atrophying. Solve problems on coding forums anonymously. Stay connected, however tenuously, to the world she'd been forced to leave behind. Her lawyer called occasionally with updates that weren't really updates. The case was progressing. These things take time. Hang in there. 6 years after her parents died, Kim had almost given up hope of ever seeing that money. She'd accepted that bureaucracy had beaten her. That sometimes the system just crushes you, and there's nothing you can do about it. By September 2023, Kimberly Johnson was 29 years old. She'd been a UPS driver for 2 years. She had $17 in her checking account. She was 3 weeks behind on rent. She was exactly the kind of person the world had trained itself not to see. The ones in brown uniforms who drop off packages and disappear. Nobody looked at her and saw the MIT scholarship student. The girl who'd been published in computer science journals at 20. The daughter whose parents died believing she'd change the world. They just saw a delivery girl. And that was fine with Kim. Being invisible meant being safe from more disappointment. On September 3, 2023, Kim had a route through downtown Seattle. Upscale buildings, expensive addresses, the kind of people who ordered from Amazon 3 times a day. She had a package for apartment 4207 in Insignia Tower. Signature required. She took the elevator to the 42nd floor, found the door, knocked. And when Anthony Halls answered, looking like death warmed over, something in Kim recognized something in him. Maybe it was the look of someone who'd lost everything. Maybe it was just the instinct of someone who'd spent years wanting to save people but could only save herself. Whatever it was, it made her ask, "Are you okay?" And that question changed everything. You know, I've been telling stories on this channel for a while now, and what gets me every single time is how the people who end up being heroes are never the ones we expect. It's never the experts. The ones with all the credentials and fancy titles. It's the people who've been broken down by life and rebuilt themselves into something stronger. The ones who understand loss intimately enough to recognize it in others. If you're still watching this, if Kim's story is hitting you somewhere deep, hit that subscribe button. Because what happens next, the way she saves Anthony, it's going to restore your faith in the idea that our struggles prepare us for purpose we can't see coming. Stay with me. September 3, 2023 was supposed to be just another Tuesday for Kim. Wake up at 6 a.m. in her studio apartment that smelled vaguely of mildew no matter how much she cleaned. Shower in the cramped bathroom where the water pressure was more suggestion than reality. Grab a protein bar because actual breakfast was a luxury she couldn't afford. Drive to the UPS distribution center in her 2007 Honda Civic that made concerning noises she couldn't afford to investigate. Her route that day covered downtown Seattle's upscale district. 43 deliveries. Most of them to doormen in luxury high-rises who'd sign without even looking at her. Quick. Efficient. Invisible. Package 37 was addressed to Anthony Halls, Insignia Tower, apartment 4207. Signature required. The box was from Dell. Probably computer equipment. Kim loaded it onto her dolly with the other packages headed to that building. The Insignia Tower's lobby was all marble and modern art that probably cost more than Kim would make in a decade. The doorman was polite but distant. That particular brand of courtesy service workers give each other. 42nd floor, turn right off the elevator. Kim had been in hundreds of buildings like this. They all blurred together after a while. Rich people with their rich problems, ordering rich people things. It wasn't resentment exactly, just observation. The elevator ride to the 42nd floor was smooth and silent. The hallway was carpeted in something plush that absorbed sound. Everything about this building whispered money. Apartment 4207's door was at the end of the hall. Kim checked the package label again. Anthony Halls. Signature required. She knocked. Nothing. She knocked again, louder. UPS delivery for Anthony Halls. I need a signature, please. The door opened slowly, and Kim found herself looking at a man who was clearly in crisis. Anthony Halls looked like he hadn't slept in days, maybe weeks. His hair was disheveled. He was wearing a wrinkled t-shirt and sweatpants. His eyes had the hollow look of someone running on fumes. But it was his hands Kim noticed first. They were shaking. Just leave it outside, Anthony said, his voice rough. Kim's professional training said to hand him the tablet. Get the signature, move on. She had 42 more deliveries to make. But something stopped her. Maybe it was the way he was holding the doorframe like he needed support. Maybe it was the glimpse she caught of the apartment behind him. Expensive furniture covered in papers and empty takeout containers. Maybe it was just that Kim knew what rock bottom looked like because she'd lived there for 6 years. Sir, I need a signature for this one. It's marked urgent and, she paused, making a decision that would change her life. Sir, are you okay? You look. The conversation that followed, the one that's already been told, unfolded exactly as you heard. Anthony's initial dismissal. Kim's persistence. The revelation about the hacking. Anthony's desperation. And Kim's offer that made no logical sense but somehow felt inevitable. Let me see your system. Give me 30 minutes. When Anthony opened the door wider and let her in, Kim stepped into a penthouse that could have been featured in architectural magazines if it wasn't currently drowning in chaos. The floor-to-ceiling windows showed Seattle spread out below like a glittering toy city. But inside, the space told a story of complete breakdown. Papers were everywhere. Legal documents. Financial statements. Printed emails. Anthony had been trying to piece together his nightmare on paper. The way people do when digital systems fail them. Empty coffee cups clustered on every surface. The kitchen trash was overflowing. The whole place smelled stale, like a person who'd stopped taking care of basic things. This is embarrassing, Anthony said, following her gaze around the room. I used to have someone who cleaned. I fired her 3 months ago. Couldn't afford her anymore. Kim set the UPS package down on the dining table, moving aside a stack of papers to make room. Show me your setup. Anthony led her to what had probably been a home office but now looked more like a war room. 6 monitors arranged in an arc, currently all displaying different security dashboards and error messages. 2 laptops, both open. A tablet. His phone. 3 cybersecurity firms have been through here, Anthony said, gesturing at the screens. They've installed so much security software that half the time I can't even access my own accounts anymore. Every single thing requires 7-factor authentication. And it doesn't matter. They still get in. Kim pulled up a chair and sat down. She'd been standing all day. Her feet hurt. But the moment she sat in front of those screens, something shifted in her. This was familiar territory. This was her language. For the first time in 6 years, Kim felt like herself. Tell me everything, she said. From the beginning. Not what the hackers did. What you did. Every forum you posted on. Every piece of information you shared. Every password structure you used. Everything. Anthony talked. For 20 minutes, he poured out the whole story. The investment forums. The screenshots with partial account numbers. The bragging. The phishing email. The cascading disaster. Kim listened without interrupting, her eyes scanning the screens, her mind already working through the problem in ways that had nothing to do with conventional cybersecurity. When he finished, she was quiet for a long moment. Your security firms were trying to build walls, she finally said. Bigger walls, stronger walls, more layers. But that's not the problem. The problem is they're already inside your walls. They've been inside for months, like you said. So building more walls just locks them inside with you. So what do I do? Kim's fingers were already moving across the keyboard. We don't lock them out. We invite them deeper in. We make them think they've won completely. And then we use their confidence against them. I don't understand. You will. But I need access to everything. Every account. Every device. Every password. And you need to trust me, which I know is asking a lot since you don't know me from anyone. Anthony stared at her. This delivery girl who'd been in his home for less than half an hour was asking for complete access to what remained of his digital life. Every rational thought said to refuse. But rational thinking had gotten him exactly nowhere for 6 months. If you steal from me, Anthony said slowly, there's nothing left to take. I'm not going to steal from you, Kim said. I'm going to catch the people who did. For the next 16 hours, Kim didn't leave that apartment. She didn't deliver the other 42 packages on her route, which would get her written up at UPS. She didn't answer when her supervisor called, twice, asking where she was. She didn't think about her rent or her empty fridge or any of the normal concerns that filled her days. For 16 hours, Kimberly Johnson was exactly who she was supposed to be. A computer scientist. A problem solver. A hunter tracking prey that didn't know it was being hunted. Anthony watched her work with a mixture of confusion and awe. She didn't just install new security. She did, but that was almost an afterthought. Instead, she spent hours setting up what she called honeypots, fake accounts and fake data that looked real enough to be valuable. She created deliberate vulnerabilities in systems that appeared secure. She left digital breadcrumbs that would be irresistible to attackers. You're making it easier for them to hack me? Anthony asked at hour 4, after Kim had intentionally weakened a password on a dummy email account. I'm giving them a target they can't resist, Kim explained, her eyes never leaving the screen. Right now, they're scattered. They have access to too many things. It's like fighting smoke. But if we give them something that looks like your crown jewels, something they think you're trying desperately to protect, they'll focus there. Consolidate. And when they do... She pulled up a program Anthony didn't recognize. Lines of code scrolled past faster than he could read. When they do, this logs every keystroke, every IP address, every connection they make. Not just where they are, but how they got there. The whole path. Every step they've been taking for months. And once we have that... Kim smiled grimly. Once we have that, we don't just kick them out. We take back everything they took. It was elegant. It was creative. It was nothing like the brute force security approaches the other firms had used. By hour 8, Kim had consumed 4 cups of Anthony's terrible instant coffee and half a leftover sandwich she'd found in his fridge. Anthony had ordered Thai food at hour 5, forcing Kim to stop long enough to eat. She'd devoured pad Thai like she hadn't eaten in days, which probably wasn't far from the truth. When's the last time you had a real meal? Anthony had asked, watching her eat. When's the last time you slept more than 3 hours? Kim countered. They'd smiled at each other. 2 people in different kinds of crisis recognizing each other's struggles. By hour 12, the traps were set. Now came the waiting. Kim explained they needed the hackers to take the bait, which might happen in hours or days. But she'd made the bait irresistible, a fake cryptocurrency wallet she'd salted through Anthony's monitored communications, mentioning it in an encrypted email to a financial advisor that she knew was being intercepted. 2 million in Bitcoin, the fake email read. Emergency access if everything else fails. Offline wallet. Secure. If the hackers were watching, and Kim knew they couldn't resist that. While they waited, Anthony and Kim talked. Really talked. She told him about MIT. About her parents. About the insurance nightmare. About 6 years of survival mode. He listened without judgment, without the pity that usually made her shut down. You should be running a company, Anthony said, not delivering packages. Oh, really? Kim replied. What if I hired you? The words came out before Anthony fully thought them through. I mean, I can't pay much right now. Everything's frozen. But if you help me get even part of this back, I'll give you 20% of everything we recover. Kim looked at him carefully. That's not necessary. I'm helping because you're a good person who saw someone who needed help. I get that. But you deserve to be compensated for skills that are clearly beyond what I can afford to actually pay you. So, partners, 20%. 10, Kim countered. 15. Deal. They shook hands at hour 13, sealing a partnership neither of them fully understood yet. At hour 14, the trap triggered. Kim's monitoring software lit up with alerts. Someone had accessed the fake cryptocurrency wallet. The program began logging everything, tracking the connection backwards through 7 different proxy servers, following the digital footprints in real time. They're in, Kim said, her voice tense with focus. What do? We watch. We learn. And we don't let them know we're watching. For 2 hours, Kim tracked the hackers' movements. She watched them try to access the fake wallet. Watched them probe for weaknesses. Watched them pull back when they encountered her carefully placed warning signs that screamed, "This might be a trap." Then watched them come back anyway, because the prize was too tempting. And while they were focused on her fake treasure, Kim was tracing every connection they'd made for the past 6 months, finding the backdoors they'd installed, mapping their entire operation. At hour 16, just as the sun was rising over Seattle and painting the penthouse in golden light, Kim had everything she needed. I know who they are, she said quietly. Or at least, I know where they've been operating from. And more importantly, I know how they've been getting in. She showed Anthony the path. A piece of malware installed on his router, of all places, that had been invisible to every scan the security firms had run because they'd been looking at his computers, his phones, his devices. Not the infrastructure connecting them. It's been here since day 1, Kim explained. March 16th. The day after you clicked that phishing link. They didn't just get your passwords. They got physical access to your router somehow, probably bribed a building maintenance worker, and installed this. Every security firm you hired secured everything downstream of this infection. But the infection was upstream the whole time. Anthony felt sick. 6 months. $500,000 in security fees. And the problem was in his router. Kim wasn't finished. But here's the good news. Now that I know how they're getting in, I can lock them out for real. And more than that. Her smile was fierce. I can trace where your money went. Not all of it. Some went through too many layers to ever recover. But some of it, probably a lot of it, is sitting in accounts that they thought were untraceable but weren't. The FBI, Anthony started, will take months to do what I can do in days, Kim finished. Your choice. We can hand this over to them. Or I can handle this my way. Anthony knew what she meant. Legal versus less legal. By the book versus whatever it takes. He thought about 6 months of hell. Thought about death threats and stolen millions and his life in ruins. Thought about the desperation that had brought him to the edge of his 42nd floor window more than once. Your way, he said. Kim nodded. Okay then. I need to go home, shower, sleep for a few hours, and probably get fired from UPS. Then I'm coming back and we're going to war. She stood up, stretching muscles that had been locked in position for 16 hours. Anthony stood too, facing her. Kim, I don't know how to thank you. You don't even know me, and you just spent all night saving my life. You don't need to thank me, Kim said. You gave me something I haven't had in a long time. What's that? A problem worth solving. She left the package from Dell on his table, still unsigned. Left her UPS dolly by his door. Walked to the elevator with Anthony watching her go, both of them knowing that something profound had just shifted in both their lives. Kim did get fired from UPS as expected. When she showed up the next day with no excuse for abandoning her route, they let her go on the spot. She didn't care. She had bigger things to do. For the next 3 weeks, Kim essentially moved into Anthony's penthouse. She set up a workstation at his dining table. Slept 4 hours a night on his couch when exhaustion forced her to stop. Lived on coffee and takeout that Anthony insisted on paying for. And piece by piece, she dismantled the hacker's operation. She recovered $8.3 million from various cryptocurrency accounts, tracing transactions that the hackers thought were anonymous. She found another $4.7 million in a Cayman Islands bank account that had been set up with Anthony's stolen identity documents. She locked the hackers out of Anthony's systems so completely that when they realized what was happening, there was nothing they could do about it. She also identified them. 3 people operating out of Bulgaria, part of a larger cybercrime organization, but these 3 had been the ones personally targeting Anthony. She handed everything to the FBI, who'd been investigating for months with little progress. Within weeks, Interpol had arrested all 3. They'd face extradition, trial, prison. But Kim's proudest moment came when she recovered access to Anthony's seized business accounts. The IRS had frozen them pending their fraud investigation. Kim proved, with meticulous documentation, that every fraudulent transaction had come from the hackers. She cleared Anthony's name completely. His businesses were destroyed. His reputation was in tatters. His $47 million was reduced to about $12 million after everything was said and done. But he was alive. He was free. He could rebuild. And he had Kim. Somewhere during those 3 weeks of working together, of late-night strategy sessions and shared takeout and the intimacy that comes from facing a crisis together, something shifted between them. It wasn't dramatic. There was no big moment. Just a gradual realization that they'd become essential to each other. On October 1st, 4 weeks after she'd first knocked on his door, Kim showed Anthony the final numbers. $12 million recovered. All legal issues resolved. Security implemented that would actually work. I owe you 15%, Anthony said. That's $1.8 million. Kim stared at the number. $1.8 million. More than twice what her parents' insurance money had been. Enough to change her entire life. I don't. She started. You earned it, Anthony said firmly. And more than that. You saved my life. Literally. I was planning to jump the night before you showed up. Did you know that? Kim hadn't known. The weight of that settled between them. I'm glad I knocked, she said softly. So am I. That night, Anthony made dinner. Actual dinner, not takeout. Salmon, the same thing he'd made the night before the hackers destroyed his world. They ate at his dining table, the one that had been covered in papers and chaos for months but was now clear. What will you do now? Anthony asked. With your money. Finish MIT, Kim said immediately. That's first. Pay off my parents' legal fees. Finally close that nightmare. After that. I don't know. Maybe start a consulting firm. Help people who get hacked. People who can't afford the fancy security companies that don't actually work. Anthony smiled. That sounds like you. Helping people. What about you? Rebuild. Slowly, carefully, and he hesitated. Maybe not do it alone this time. Kim looked at him across the table. This man who'd been a stranger a month ago. This man she'd saved, who'd somehow saved her right back by giving her back her purpose. Yeah, she said. Maybe not alone. That was the beginning. The real beginning. Not of a business partnership, though that continued. Not of friendship, though they became the best of friends. But of something neither of them had been looking for but both desperately needed. Love. But that love didn't happen overnight. That's not how real love works. Real love is built in the quiet moments, in the ordinary days that follow extraordinary circumstances. And for Kim and Anthony, those ordinary days were still ahead of them, each one building toward a future neither could have imagined when she first knocked on apartment 4207's door. The weeks immediately following Kim's recovery of Anthony's assets felt like waking up from a nightmare. Everything was still bruised and tender, but at least the immediate danger had passed. Anthony could breathe again without feeling like his chest was caving in. Kim had money in her account for the first time in years, real money, enough to stop the constant mental calculation of whether she could afford food and rent in the same week. But money, while solving immediate problems, doesn't heal deeper wounds overnight. Kim's first major expense after buying herself one decent meal and paying her overdue rent was calling her lawyer in Ohio, the one who'd been dragging her parents' insurance case along for 6 years. "I want to settle," she told him. "Whatever they're offering now, take it." "Kim, if we wait a little longer, I think we can get the full amount," he said, same song he'd been singing for years. "How much longer?" "Another year. 2. 5 more years." Kim's voice was steel. "I don't need the full amount anymore. But I need this closed. I need to be done with it. So whatever they're offering, accept it, take your fees, and close the case." 3 weeks later, Kim received a check for $420,000. After her lawyer took his cut, after 6 years of legal fees and bureaucratic nightmares, she walked away with $280,000 of her parents' life insurance. It was less than half what they'd left her. But it was closure. Finally, closure. She called Anthony from her studio apartment, crying so hard she could barely speak. "They're done," she managed to say. "It's over. It's finally over. Come over," Anthony said immediately. "You shouldn't be alone right now." She drove to his penthouse at 9 p.m. on a Tuesday. He'd ordered dinner from her favorite Thai place, the one they'd been eating from constantly during those intense 3 weeks. He didn't try to talk or offer advice. He just sat with her while she cried, sometimes from grief, sometimes from relief, often from both at once. That was the first night Kim slept in Anthony's guest bedroom. It wouldn't be the last. Over the next few months, a pattern developed. Kim was officially living in her studio apartment, but she spent most of her time at Anthony's place. It started because she was helping him rebuild his business infrastructure, setting up security systems and rebuilding his online presence. But it continued because neither of them really wanted to be apart. Anthony's business recovery was slow but steady. The $12 million he'd recovered wasn't enough to restore him to his former wealth, but it was more than enough to start over intelligently. He liquidated some of his real estate holdings at a loss, but got out from under properties that had become liabilities. He restructured his investment approach, more conservative now, less flashy. He also dealt with his reputation problem head-on. He gave an interview to the Seattle Times, the same paper that had run the story about his supposed fraud. He told the whole truth, the hacking, the recovery, even his near suicide. The article that ran was titled, "From $47 million to Rock Bottom and Back. One Man's Cybersecurity Nightmare." It went viral. Suddenly, Anthony wasn't a cautionary tale about hubris. He was a survivor. Companies started calling him for speaking engagements. Cybersecurity conferences wanted him to share his story. He turned most of them down, but accepted a few, always insisting that Kim be part of the presentation. "She's the one who solved it," he'd say. "I just made the mistakes." Kim, meanwhile, was dealing with her own renaissance. With money in her account and a proven track record of solving an impossible hacking case, she reapplied to MIT. She sent them an email explaining her situation, her withdrawal due to financial hardship, and her desire to complete her degree. Dr. Elizabeth Morrison, the professor who'd tried to help her 6 years earlier, responded within 24 hours. "Kimberly, we would be honored to have you back. Let me make some calls." In January 2024, Kim moved to Cambridge to finish her senior year. It felt surreal, walking back onto MIT's campus at age 29, nearly a decade after she'd first arrived. She was older than most of her professors had been when she left. The other students in her classes looked impossibly young. But she belonged there. She'd always belonged there. And this time she could actually afford to be there. Anthony visited her twice during that spring semester. They called each other every night. The distance was hard but necessary. Kim needed to do this on her own, to complete what her parents had dreamed for her. On May 18, 2024, Kimberly Johnson walked across the stage and received her Bachelor of Science in Computer Science from MIT. Anthony was in the audience, sitting next to Kim's aunt from Ohio, one of the few relatives Kim had left. When they called Kim's name, Anthony stood and cheered loud enough that people 3 rows over gave him looks. He didn't care. He was watching someone he loved achieve something extraordinary, something that had been stolen from her and that she'd fought like hell to get back. At the reception afterwards, Kim introduced Anthony to her professors, to the friends she'd reconnected with. "This is Anthony," she'd say. He's my." She never quite knew how to finish that sentence. And Anthony never pushed. They weren't officially dating. They hadn't had that conversation. But they also hadn't been apart for more than a week in 8 months. They talked every day. They knew each other's coffee orders and nightmares and hopes. What were they? Everything except officially together. That changed the night of Kim's graduation. They went to dinner, just the 2 of them, at a nice restaurant in Boston. Anthony ordered wine. Kim was exhausted but euphoric. She'd done it. She'd finished. After everything, she'd finished. "I'm proud of you," Anthony said, raising his glass. "Your parents would be proud too." Kim's eyes filled with tears, the good kind. "Thank you. For being here. For believing I could do this. Kim, you saved my life. The least I could do was watch you complete yours." "I didn't just save your life," Kim said quietly. "You saved mine too. You gave me back my purpose. You made me remember who I was supposed to be." Anthony reached across the table and took her hand. "I need to tell you something. I've been trying to figure out how to say it for months, but there's no perfect time, so I'm just going to say it. I'm in love with you. I think I have been since you refused to leave my apartment that first day. And I know this is complicated. I know I'm 8 years older than you. I know we started in the middle of a crisis. I know all the reasons this might not make sense. But I don't care. I love you." Kim stared at him, her hand in his, her heart racing. "I love you too," she said. "I was scared to say it because I didn't want to mess up what we have. But Anthony, I love you. Completely. Probably since week 2 of helping you, when you made me eat that sandwich and I realized you cared about me, not just what I could do for you." They both started laughing, the kind of relieved laughter that comes from finally saying something you've been holding in for too long. "So," Anthony said, "what do we do now?" "I moved back to Seattle," Kim said immediately. "I'm done with Boston. I want to be where you are." "Move in with me," Anthony said. "Actually move in." Not your stuff scattered around while you officially live somewhere else. Really move in. Okay, Kim said. Yes. Absolutely yes. They kissed across the table, not caring that they were in a fancy restaurant, not caring about anything except the fact that they'd found each other in the middle of their respective disasters and somehow built something beautiful from the wreckage. Kim moved back to Seattle in June. She moved her meager possessions into Anthony's penthouse, which really didn't take long since she owned almost nothing. Anthony insisted they go furniture shopping. You need your own space here, he said. Your own office. We'll convert one of the guest rooms. They spent a weekend at IKEA, like a normal couple, arguing playfully about desk configurations and chair ergonomics. It was aggressively ordinary, and that's what made it perfect. That summer, Kim and Anthony started what they'd discussed during her MIT recovery work, a consulting firm specifically for cybersecurity victims. They called it Second Chance Security. The premise was simple. Help people who'd been hacked and couldn't afford the big firms or hadn't been helped by them. They took on clients who'd been scammed out of retirement savings. Small businesses that had been ransomed. Regular people dealing with identity theft that the authorities had no time to properly investigate. Kim handled the technical work. Anthony handled the business side and used his connections to push cases with law enforcement. They didn't charge much. Sometimes they didn't charge at all. They weren't getting rich, but that wasn't the point. The point was using Kim's extraordinary skills to help people who were drowning the way Anthony had been drowning. By fall, Second Chance Security had helped recover over $3 million for various clients. Local news picked up their story. Then national news. Kim gave interviews, uncomfortable at first with the attention, but getting better at explaining how being an MIT dropout forced to survive had given her a unique perspective on cybersecurity. I understand how normal people think about computers, she explained in one interview. Not tech people. Normal people. And that's who hackers target. So I approach security from the perspective of the victim, not from the perspective of a programmer. It's a completely different mindset. The interviewer asked about her background. Kim told the story of her parents, of the insurance nightmare, of delivering packages to survive. She told it without self-pity, just facts. But viewers heard the resilience in her voice. The strength. After that interview aired, Kim's aunt called her, crying. Your parents would be so proud, she said. So incredibly proud. Anthony's mother flew up from California to meet Kim officially. They'd video chatted a few times, but this was the first in-person meeting. Barbara Halls was a sharp woman in her 60s who'd raised Anthony as a single mother after his father left when he was young. She pulled Kim aside during dinner the first night. My son loves you, she said directly. I can see why. You're remarkable. Thank you, Kim said, nervous. But more than that, you're good for him. He was drowning in his own success before the hack. Now he's actually doing something meaningful. You did that. We did that together, Kim corrected gently. Barbara smiled. Yes. Together. That's exactly my point. The months passed in a blur of work and domesticity. Kim and Anthony fell into routines. Morning coffee together before diving into work. Lunch meetings that were half business, half excuse to be in the same room. Evening walks through downtown Seattle. Weekend trips to the mountains or the coast. They fought sometimes, normal couple fights about dishes and schedules and whose turn it was to grocery shop. They made up quickly, both of them too aware of how precious their time together was to waste it on stubbornness. On Christmas Eve 2024, 14 months after Kim had first knocked on his door, Anthony took Kim to the observation deck of the Columbia Tower, Seattle's tallest building. It was freezing cold and the city was lit up below them. Holiday lights making everything look magical. I've been thinking, Anthony said, his breath fogging in the cold air. Dangerous. Kim teased. I'm serious. Kim, I know we haven't been together that long, officially. 15 months if you count from when you saved my life, or 7 months if you count from when we actually started dating. Either way, it's not very long. Anthony, Kim said slowly, starting to realize where this was going. But I don't care about timelines or what's supposed to be normal. I know what I know. And I know I want to spend the rest of my life with you. I know I want to build a company with you and a home with you and a future with you. So, he got down on one knee, pulling a box from his pocket. Kimberly Johnson, will you marry me? The ring was simple and beautiful, a sapphire surrounded by small diamonds. Your birthstone, Anthony said. September. Kim was crying, nodding before she could speak. Yes. Yes. Obviously yes. He stood and kissed her, and below them Seattle sparkled in the winter night, and neither of them was thinking about hackers or lost fortunes or dead parents or any of the pain that had brought them to this moment. They were just thinking about the future. Their future. Together. They got married on September 3, 2025. Exactly 2 years after Kim had knocked on Anthony's door. The wedding was small, held in a garden venue outside Seattle. Barbara Halls was there. Kim's aunt. Their few close friends. Dr. Morrison from MIT flew in. Some of their second-chance security clients. Kim wore a simple white dress. Anthony cried when he saw her walking down the aisle. Kim cried during her vows. Everyone cried during the reception when they played a video message from some of their clients, people whose lives they'd helped rebuild, talking about what second-chance security had meant to them. To Kim and Anthony, one woman said in the video, a grandmother they'd helped recover $200,000 that had been stolen by scammers. You gave me back my retirement. More than that, you gave me hope. May your marriage be as strong as your partnership. During their first dance, Kim whispered to Anthony, Did you ever imagine this? 2 years ago. 2 years ago, I was planning to jump off my balcony, Anthony whispered back. So no. I didn't imagine this. I couldn't have imagined you. I was delivering packages and eating ramen for the 3rd night in a row, Kim said. I didn't imagine this either. I think that's the point though. We don't know what's coming. We just have to stay open to possibility. Very philosophical, Mrs. Halls. I kept my name, Kim said. Johnson. I'm keeping it. I know, Anthony said. I wouldn't expect anything else. They danced in the fading light, surrounded by people who loved them. Building a life neither had planned but both had earned through suffering and survival and the simple act of showing up for each other when it mattered most. After the wedding, they went to Hawaii for a week. Lay on beaches and did absolutely nothing productive. It was the first real vacation either of them had taken in years. Kim kept reaching for her phone to check work emails before remembering she was supposed to be relaxing. This is harder than hacking, she complained on day 3. Relaxing. Yeah. Apparently, I've forgotten how. We'll relearn together, Anthony said and pulled her into the ocean. When they returned to Seattle, their business had 3 new clients waiting. They dove back into work, but with new boundaries. No work after 7 p.m. Weekends were sacred unless it was an emergency. Date nights twice a week. Mandatory. They started a foundation too. The Johnson Halls Foundation for Educational Recovery. Its purpose was to help students who'd been forced to drop out of college due to family crises or financial disasters. They gave grants, no strings attached, to help people finish their degrees. We're making sure no one else loses 6 years like I did, Kim explained to the board they assembled. In their first year, they helped 37 students stay in or return to college. Kim personally called each one. Some of them cried when they heard her story. All of them said some version of the same thing. Thank you for not giving up on us. By late 2025, Kim and Anthony's life looked nothing like either of them had imagined 3 years earlier. They weren't as wealthy as Anthony had been before. They were working harder than they'd ever worked. But they were happy. Genuinely, deeply happy. They'd learned something that most people never figure out. That the worst moments of our lives, the moments where everything falls apart, those can be the doorways to something better. Not because the pain was worth it. Pain is never worth it. But because how we respond to pain, how we choose to help each other through it, that's where real meaning lives. Anthony had lost a fortune and found a purpose. Kim had lost her parents and her degree and 6 years of her life, but she'd gotten herself back. And they'd found each other at the exact moment when they both needed saving. Every year on September 3rd, they celebrate two things: their wedding anniversary, and the day Kim knocked on Anthony's door. The day everything changed. They call it Knock Day, and they always order Thai food and stay up late talking about where they've been and where they're going. On their first Knock Day as a married couple, September 3rd, 2026, they sat on their balcony, the one Anthony had almost jumped from, and looked out at Seattle below. Do you ever wonder what would have happened if you'd left that package and walked away? Anthony asked. Every day, Kim said honestly. But I didn't. And you opened the door. And here we are. Here we are, Anthony echoed. And honestly, if you've made it this far in their story, if you've spent this time learning about two people who found each other in the middle of disaster, do me a favor. Hit that subscribe button. Because this channel is full of stories like this. Stories about real people facing impossible situations and finding their way through. Stories about the unexpected ways we save each other. Stories that remind us that hope isn't naive, it's necessary. Kim and Anthony's story isn't finished. They're still building their life, still helping people, still figuring out this whole marriage thing one day at a time. And that's the point. The story doesn't end with the wedding. The story is in the living. So subscribe and stick around for more of these kinds of stories. We're all just trying to figure it out together. So that's the story of how a millionaire got hacked and ruined, and how a delivery girl did what no programmer had done. But it's also the story of how compassion matters more than expertise sometimes. How the person who saves your life might show up in a brown uniform carrying a package. How love can grow in the middle of crisis. How the skills we think we've lost never really leave us. Anthony Halls and Kimberly Johnson are real people, though their names have been changed for privacy. They're still married. They're still running Second Chance Security. They've helped over 200 people recover from cyber attacks as of 2025. They're still fighting insurance companies and hackers and bureaucracy on behalf of people who don't have the resources to fight for themselves. Their story matters because it's proof that we're not defined by what happens to us. We're defined by what we do next. Anthony could have jumped. Kim could have stayed bitter and broken. Instead, they chose to help each other. And that choice changed everything. If you're going through something right now, if you're in your own version of rock bottom, remember Kim and Anthony. Remember that help might come from the most unexpected places. Remember that your worst day might be setting you up for your best life. Remember that knocking on doors, both literally and figuratively, takes courage, but it might save someone's life. Maybe even your own. And please, wherever you are in the world, leave a comment. Tell us where you're watching from. Share your thoughts about this story. Have you ever been helped by a stranger? Have you ever been that stranger for someone else? This community we're building here, it's about more than just watching videos. It's about connecting over these human stories that remind us what matters. So, Houston, Texas, London, Toronto, Sydney, Lagos, Mumbai. Wherever you are right now, drop a comment. Let us know you were here. Let us know this story meant something to you. Because in the end, that's what Kim and Anthony's story is really about. It's about meaning. It's about mattering. It's about showing up at someone's door and refusing to walk away when every logical reason says you should. It's about love found in the most unlikely circumstances and hope rebuilt from complete devastation. It's about second chances. And isn't that what we all need sometimes? A second chance. A knock on the door. A stranger who becomes the most important person in your life. Thank you for watching. Thank you for being here. And remember, the best stories are the ones we live, not just the ones we watch or hear. Until next time.